All right, so welcome back to today's class. Um, we're going to continue from where we stopped. Last time we talked about what is React and how you can install React using the Vite tooling. And again, we talked about what is JSX. Under the JSX, we talked about what is JSX expression, and at the same time, we talked about what is JSX element. But apart from that one, the major thing that is here too is that we talked about component, because when you're dealing with React, the main building block of React is component. And how do you create a component? What do you do inside component? We've talked about the basic stuff about it at the last class there. So today we are going to continue from there by talking about what is props and children props in React. Apart from that, we are going to be talking about states in React. And again, we're moving into the events. And after the event, we are going to stop at this conditional rendering. So which means in the next class, we are going to be starting with the list rendering and then go with how to style your components. And from there, we'll put everything together and we're going to work on a simple project that use everything together there. Before we now move into the intermediary or the intermediate part of the class. So we are starting with the basic, which is the component, and then we move to the JSX element or JSX expression here. And JSX expression, again, we're going to be talking about the props, and under the props, we're going to be talking about the children prop there, then the states. From states, we move to events. How do you handle the event in your React application? And at the same time, how do you show something based on a condition? So how do you show your component or something that you want to show on the screen based on what is going on the page there? Maybe someone click on a button and you want to show maybe on or off based on some logic or based on the state of the application. So we're going to see how to do all these things today. So to do a recap, what is component? A component is a reusable block of code that describes the data and the UI that you want to showcase to the user on the page. And again too, we talked about that the component is reusable because it's a function or is a block of code that you define or to the React there that okay, these are set of data inside this block and this is what I want to happen or this is what I want to show on the UI anytime a user carry this action, or if they are not even doing anything, this is what I want you to display to the user on the page. And how do you create a component in React? We have two ways of creating a component. We have the class component and we have the functional component. But in a modern React application, what you only see is a functional component. And what does that mean? It means you are creating a function, you are creating a component using the function. So there's another way of creating your component. Instead of using this one, you can use a class, which is what we used before React 16.8, I think. So what I have to create class, I have to create component using class. You have to declare the class, then you give you whatever the name of your component. For example, here now, this is going to be Warisola class component like this. See what you have to type. This one is coming from you. You can name it anything. Then after that, you are going to implement or you are going to extend rather. So you are going to extend. What are you extending? You are going to be extending the component that is coming from React. See a lot of things you have to do just to create a component. But with a functional component, what you just do, declare the function, name it whatever you want to call it, but you know that your function name should start with uppercase because that's how this thing is going to be treated as a component. And then whatever you want to show on the screen, that's what you are going to return. And what are you returning? What you are returning is just your normal JSX code. And I told you JSX code is split into two. We have the element and we have the expression. So the normal HTML tag that you know with normal HTML there, you can use them here too, but we don't call them tag, we call them JSX element because they are not technically normal HTML that you know, even though you are typing them like that, but they are not technically HTML because there is some stuff that is going to be going on with them later on. What you type here, that's not what is going to appear on the screen. But most of the tag or JSX element you are going to use, they look exactly like your normal HTML tag, but they are not HTML tag. React is going to generate the corresponding tag that the browser is going to see by the time everything is compiled together there. So this one now, to complete this class component, so we need to call this component. And where is it coming from? This is something we need to import from React because and this is how to create a class component. And inside it, if you want, you can do whatever you want to do. For example, you can just call this render. So what is this render? Where is it coming from? It's coming from what we are extending here. So whatever you, as you can see, we have access to render. Where is render coming from? It's coming from this component. And whatever you return from this function here, that's what you want to show on the screen. So this is how to do it when you are dealing with class component. But we are not going to be using class component because this one is old way or the legacy way of creating a component. So when you want to create your component, this is how you are going to do it when you are dealing with this thing here. But I don't want to use this method. I want to go with the functional component because that's how you create your React component these days. But this is another way of creating a component, which I'm going to disable here or comment out because I don't want to use it at all. So to create a component, we're always going to follow this pattern here like that. So you create a function. The function can be this normal function or it can be arrow function. But right now, I'm using this function keyword to create our function. But it can be arrow function too. There, it will always work. So here we have the function. We give it a name, which is the name of your component. Because when you want to use your component later on, the name that you give to your function is what you are going to use to call it, which is what we are doing on this line here. So we create our function down here, and we are using it on this line 8, and at the same time we are using another one on line 10. And how do you use your component? You go to where you want to use it and you call it like your normal HTML tag. The way you used to call your HTML tag, that's the same way you are going to call your component. And as you can see, these two, they are self-closing. Why are they self-closing? Is because we are not putting anything inside it. But you are going to see later on or soon that you can use this method too to create your component. And this one will allows you to pass something under it that you want to send down into your component. But once we get into it now, you see all this in action. But your component can be used in this way or in this way. If you are not passing anything to it, you can use any method. But if you need to send down some details to this your component, you might need to do it in this way like this, and you pass down the details. Just like the way we have this H1 that we are putting the content that is going to affect under it. So we can do the same thing too with our component. But how do you do that? That's where the props comes in, and these children. So we have props and we have the children props there. Let me, because it's the same thing. So let me just rename this thing correctly. We have props and children prop like this, because it's something, it's a prop too. So we have props and we have this children prop in React. So what is prop? Props is just a property that you are passing, or this is how component communicate with each other. So one component can use another component, but there is some time that a particular component needs extra information from you in order for it to function very well. For example, now look at this, our H1. We want to give it a class. So how do we supply that information to it? We are using this attribute class. But look at the way I type the stuff, because this is one of the stuff I'm talking about here. This H1 that we type here, when you are dealing with normal HTML, what you are going to type is class. It is not class name. But this one will not work in React because this is not normal HTML. And as you can see down here, we are using the class as one of the way to create your component. So you can't use it here. It will complain because it will think you are trying to create a component here. You can't just use keyword class as part of your HTML, but the HTML needs it. So in order for it to work in React, it's renamed to this class name. But by the time you get to the browser, what you're actually going to see is your normal class. So by the time we expand this, can you see what we type in our code is class name, but by the time you get to the browser, what the browser is saying is class. And that's what I'm saying here, that this thing is not your normal HTML code. This is GSX code. So what you are typing here, it looks like your normal HTML, but it is not. It's GSX. So React will transform it to a proper tag that the browser can understand. And that's why you see that what we type here is quite different from what we are seeing on the browser. So when you want to give element any class, this is how we do it, but we'll talk more about it when we get to the style. But the major thing here is that we are able to supply attributes to this our h1. So we are able to supply extra information to the tag. The same thing here too. If I want, I can give it id, and the id of this element is going to be my heading, like this. So my heading, save it, and by the time we get to the browser, we should see this particular attributes added to the element. As you can see, the id, which is the attribute along with the value, has been added to the element. So how do we do something like this with our component? How do we do something like this too with our component? Is there a way we can send attributes down to your component? And that's what we call props. So whatever attributes or whatever information that you are sending down to your component, like this way, we call it props, which is for properties. So you are sending down properties to your component, and based on those properties, it can do something for you. So for example here, let me comment out all these components that I have down here. Again too, I don't need this one right now, so let me comment them out, and we're going to create a component that can receive props, because right now all this one, they are not receiving anything. So let me just create a component. The name of the component is going to, let me use function, because I'm putting it down here. You have to use function because we want to use it at the top. So this one is going to be my name, or let's just call it print user name, or let's just say user info. So user info. And what is this component all about? What the component is just going to do here is to print out the info of the user. But this component that we have, we want to be able to reuse it. We want to be able to reuse it so that I can call it multiple times and supply different user info to it. Not that I'll be doing copy and paste. No, the same component, but I want to be able to reuse it in a different way. So I'm going to have this OL. Inside my OL like this, I'm going to have li. The first one I'm going to have there, or let me have table. Table will be better than this. So we are going to have a table in this way. Inside the table, we are going to have our row like this, which is the header part. So inside the header, we are going to have our th. It looks like you are dealing with normal HTML. These are not HTML. These are GSX elements. But to transform them to a proper HTML element that you'll be seeing on the browser there. So we are going to have the username of the user. Apart from the user name, we are going to have the level, and at the same time, we are going to have the score. So this is what we want to do. For this component here now, I want to be able to reuse it anytime I have different users to display their info. So we have this table which is having this header part of it. So I'm going to create another row again like this, and inside this row, that's where I will have the actual data. So here I will just use Warisola for example right now. So the level is going to be 500, then the rank or the score is going to be 20 like this. So this is our component right now. This component is not reusable yet. So it's not reusable. It's just displaying one user info, which is the user that I have down here. So let's use the component. So let's use it to save, and let us go back to the page. And now we should have the info about the user. As you can see here, we have the username, the level, and the score. So let me quickly style the stuff, but forget about the styling for now. When we get to the styling part, I will be talking more about it. But let me just quickly add this styling for our table so that it makes it look nice. So we have the table like this. So let me just apply the stuff from so let me expand this thing very well. Let me apply it from here. So the table will have border of one like this so that we can have the line around everything. So here we should have the line. Yeah, and I don't like this color that this thing is using, so let me remove some of the styling that this thing is using there so that our stuff can display correctly. So let me remove this one too, like that. Go back to the page, and we should have the details. Yes, so let me see, are they using, because currently it's using some stuff that I don't want it to use. So the color, the background is this, the background color is this. I don't want it to use any of this info, because yeah, so remove it. Is there any other thing? So save, go back to the page. We should have a plain white instead of having this black. Okay, I'm still not having the stuff. Let me check the body. Is there any color, background color is this? But yeah, so everything is back. This is what I want. TR. Okay, so let me arrange this thing correctly. So this is going to be T-head. T-head is not a must, but it's better we arrange this thing correctly. This is going to be T-body, which is everything we talked about under the normal HTML. So these are just normal HTML. I don't need to be going over them. So everything should be arranged, and we should see the stuff in a plain white, so not that dark color that we have there before. So now look at this component here now. So we want to be able to reuse this component. And what did I mean by that? So here now, I want to be able, this is what we call reuse. As you can see, I'm using it 3 times. But now if I go to the page, you are going to see that it's displaying the same info again and again and again. But this is not what I want. What I want is that the first one that I use, I want it to show Warisola for the name. But the same component, I want to use it for another user. Again too, I want to use it for another user, and so forth like that. Don't forget the stuff about React. Component is a reusable block of code or self-contained code. So how do you make your component to be reusable? So we do that through something known as props. So through the props, which is the property, you can send down the info that you want your component to act on. The data that you want your component to use to display the information on the screen, you can send down to it by following the same pattern that we have on the normal HTML through the attribute. So this H1 now, we are giving it this attribute ID. The same H1, we are giving it attribute class or any other attribute that you can give your element there. So you can send attribute down to your component, but we don't call it attributes when you are dealing with component. We call it props. So how do you send the information down to it? You follow the same pattern, just like the way you send information down or you pass the attribute to your normal HTML. So here, if I want, I can just say the username here now is going to be raster. So for the first one, the username is going to be raster. So the level is going to be 200 like this, and the last, the score is going to be 30 like this. So whatever you are using, it depends on you. So this name here is not something that is static, or it's something that you have to use this same name every time. No, whatever stuff you decide to pass down into your component, or whatever the component needs from you, you can send it down through this property here. So what we are doing here is that React behind the scene is going to create an object, and that object is what we call props here. So and that object is going to hold everything that you send down into this component. So through that object, you can now use it directly in your component anytime you need it. So the same property that I sent to this one, I can send it down to this one too, like this. But instead of it to be raster, this one is going to be Warisola like this. So the level is going to be 500. Then the score is going to be maybe let's just say 420 or 41 or any number like this. And lastly too, I can do the same thing for this one. This is going to be James, then the level is going to be 100, and for the score is going to be 300. The same component, and we are sending down the same property, but the value is quite different. And that's what we want our component to display. So in place of this Warisola now, he's going to pick the value that we send down for this. In place of level, he's going to pick the value that we send for this, and in place of score, he's going to pick the value for what we have there. He's not going to do it for you automatically. You have to be the one that will tell you what to do. But we are getting there. What you are sending down here, or what you are seeing here, is what we refer to as props or property. So this is the username property, level property, and the score property. And we are sending down all of them to this component. And inside your component, you can receive them. Right now, we are not receiving anything. If you go back to the page, you still see that it's showing Warisola because that's what we are still using inside the component. But we don't want to use this text. We want to use what the user is sending to us, or whatever the component or whatever you are sending down to the component, we want to be able to use it in it. So how do you get the information or the props that are being sent down into the component? So anytime you create a component, React will actually send anything that you send to this component as props. But the props that I call it here, you can name it anything. But by convention in React, we normally call it props. If you like, you can call it X. If you like, you can call it Y. But no, this is just your this in there parameter. No, this is normal function, which is going to receive a parameter or argument later on. But the stuff that the React will send to you down, we normally call it props, because it will send down everything that you pass into your component as props. So whenever you pass to your component like this, they are going to get sent down into this particular parameter here, which we normally call prop. But if you like, you can call it anything. But since you are dealing with React, you always follow what other people are doing, or the community in general. So we normally use these props. But if you like, you can call it X. But don't use X just because it will work. If you are working with other people, they will get confused, even though they know what is going on. But this thing doesn't make sense because you are going to be using it in your component. But anybody that see props and that person is familiar with React, there's no way they will not know what is going on when you are using it in your code anyway. They already know that that thing is coming from props. But when you just say X, what is X all about? So they have to find where X is coming from before they can understand your code. But using props, anybody that see it in your code already know what is going on. And that's the reason why we normally follow that convention and just call it props here. And it's something we can console so that you see what this thing is giving us there. So if I console log out these props are here. For every component that we call, you see that it's going to log out each one of them that is there for it. So for the first one, the name is going to be, username is going to be Rasta. For the second one, username is going to be Warisola. For the third one, username is going to be James, and so forth like that, depending on the props that you pass down into your component. Is this not saved? Let me save it and go back to the screen. As you can see, for the first one, can you see the props? It's getting the level, the score, and the username. So for the second one that we rendered, as you can see, it get 541 and Warisola here. And last one, it get this James for his own username and so forth like that. Now, everything that the user is sending to you, or the user of this your component, can be you, or you create the component for someone else to use. But whatever you send down here to your component, you are going to receive it as an object here. And inside the object, for you to have access to any one of them, the same name that you are using to send it down, that's the same name is going to use to represent them. So because we use username, level, and score, that's why I'm using all this name. If you put another name, it will switch it. For example, instead of username, I can call it user. So for the first one, what it will send down is user, not username. But for the second one and the third one, it will send username. Because whatever you pass, that's what it's going to send down to you with the same name. So once this thing is, let me reload it again so that we can have, as you can see, for the first one, what is sending is user. The name you are using for your prop there, that's the same thing it's going to use to send it down. So which means you must use a valid object name here. You can't just use anything that is not valid. If you just say username or whatever stuff, this is not good. You should always use a name that you can work with as an object there like that. So which is sending. But now in order for you to have access to this thing, you can't just come here in your stuff here and just say props, then user, then iPhone. This is not going to work in JavaScript. So in order for you to have access to this, as you can see, it will complain. In JavaScript, you cannot use any illegal name to have access to the data. So for you to have access to it, you have to put it in a square and you have to put it in a quote and you remove this stuff. That's when you are going to have access to the stuff like this. But this is too much to work with. It's not dynamic something that you want. You already know the name. So why do we need to do it like this? We can just use the username directly, username directly like this, or you can use user. Anything you pass into it is going to give you the value that is there based on the name that you use to send it. And everything that you have here is what we refer to as props. Everything that you have here is what we refer to as props. So everything you are sending down here is what we refer to as props, and you can have access to it in the component that you are working with. So to have access to it, just receive the data through the parameter here, and that parameter we normally call it props like this. You can call it anything you want, but we normally call it props because it's just going to be object, and that object is going to be whatever you send down into your component. But in React, we have a special prop. We have a special prop known as children, and this thing is array of whatever you send down into your component in this way. So when you create your component in this way, for example like this user info, so anything that you pass down in between the opening and the closing tag of your component, this is what we call children. So anything you pass here, what's going on? So whatever you pass here is going to be children. For example, here I'm passing the span. So this is one of the children. So span testing like this. So span. Again, I'm passing my OL. So I have OL. Then inside it, I'm closing my OL like this. So everything that you are passing in between opening and closing of your component, that's what we refer to as children props. So React is going to send everything that is like this into your component through what we call children. You know, look at the object that we have. The way we declare them, that's the same way they are coming back. But now, how do you have access to everything that you put in between the opening and the closing of that your component? That's where the children prop comes in. So React will send down this one automatically for you. You don't need to give it any name. React will send this one down anytime you have open and closing tag for your component and you put something in between. So when there is something in between there, it will get sent down as children, and that's what we call children prop. Props in general is whatever details or the properties that you are sending down to your component. So any one of them that you send like this, they are going to get sent down according to the way you define their name. But any other thing that you pass in between opening and the closing tag, they are going to get sent down through this children property on these props. It will get sent down through these props too, but it's going to be named as children, and it's going to be array of everything that you put inside it, because it's not just one item. So by the time we open this thing now and go back to the page, can you see now? So the last one, can you see what is here? Is now children, which is now holding information about everything that we put in between it. So when you are using opening and closing like this, whatever you put in between it, it will get sent down through this property here. So if you need access to it, just use prop.children. It will give you everything that you pass like this. But if you are passing the property like this, then you use the same name that you used to send it. So if you want to get this username, this raster now, you have to do props.username. If you want to get this level of 200, you have to do props.level and so forth like that. And this is what that is going to make your component to be reusable in React. So in order for your component to be reusable in React, you need to be able to send information down to the component. So in order for your component to be reusable in React, you need to send information down to your component so that it can know what to show based on that information that you are sending to the component. So here we create this component user info, and this user info is going to display the table, the username, the level, and the score of the user. But this component, we want to use it 3 times or 4 times based on the number of students or based on the number of users that we have there. So, and in order for this component to work differently based on the data that you are sending to it, you need to use props, which is short for properties. And again too, when you are dealing with component, you can actually declare your component in this way by having the opening and the closing tag. And in between opening and the closing tag, you can supply information like this or other element or component, just like the way we can do with normal HTML tag. Inside this H1, we put the text. We can put span or any other element, and it's going to handle it for us. But now the component is not being created by the browser. We are the one that created the component. So we need to take everything that we are being passing or whatever that is being passing to it and use the details. But the details that are being passed to it, it can come in this form, which is the normal props. The name you use to send down the information, that's the same name you are going to use to get it on the parameter, which we normally call props, that is getting sent down to the component. But if you have this open and closing tag there, then this one is a special kind of a props, and that props is what we refer to as children props. So it's known as children props are there like that. And how do you have access to it? So to have access to the props, just receive the parameter, call it anything you want, or by convention always call it these props, but you can call it anything you want. And on these props, you are going to have all the information that are being sent down into the component. So if I need the children on it, I just need to, you know, for example here, I can just console log that children by just doing props, then dot children like this. So whatever details that is being sent down to it as children is going to give it to us on the page. For example here, press enter. For the other one, they are not going to have anything, as you can see. For the first one, we did not pass any children to it, so it will be undefined because we are not using open and closing to use that component. The same thing with the second one, but the third one is going to have children. Can you see? This is the third one, so it have children, which is this two item that is inside. Whatever you pass there can be normal text. It doesn't need to be any other. Again, it can be another component on its own and so forth like that. So it can be another component too, which is what we are doing. If you look at this app, you know that is a component on its own, but inside it we are using another component. So that's how it is. You can create a component, and that component too will be using another component inside it, and that's where the reusability of the React component comes in, which give you the power to build user interface that are recurrent. You only have it once, you only build it once, but you can now use it again and again. But like sometimes some of them, the data inside them will be different, so you can send down the details through what we call props. So the props can be the normal props like this, or it can be the children, which React is going to create for you automatically. So anything you put in between opening and the closing tag of your component is going to get sent down to your component as children automatically. The name is always children, you cannot change the name. But if it's something you are passing like this, the name you use to send it down, that's the same name you are going to use to receive it in your component there like that. So I'm going to comment out this one right now because we are not using it, but we'll come back into that one when we need it. So now the details that we send down into our component, we need to replace it. We need to replace all this one now with the details. So I'm going to comment out all this one. So now how do we have access to them? Instead of us using Warisola now, we can use props dot username. But don't forget, when you do something like that, like this, it will not work. Because if you go to the page, the way you type it, that's the same way it's going to show on the screen. I told you last time, anytime you want this thing to interpret it as a JavaScript code for you, you have to use JSX expression. And you know JSX expression is anything that you put inside curly brace. So inside your JSX element, if you want to use JavaScript, you have to put it inside curly brace so that it can interpret it as JavaScript for you. Once you enter the element, anything you type, it will assume it's just normal text. The way you type it, that's the same way it will send it to the browser. Let me turn off this error that this thing is showing. We don't need it right now. So we don't need to set up this thing. We are just learning. So let me turn off this error. There is some setting that is checking your code whether you type something correctly or not, but we don't need that now right now. So let me turn it off. But we're going to be using all these things later on. So let me turn it off. We don't need this error, so it should be off like this. We don't need it. We are just learning, so there's no need for us to have all this. So on the props, we are receiving the username. Don't forget the same name that you are using to send it. That's what you'll be using down there. So the same thing here too. we know that we want to have level. So this is going to be props dot level. Why am I using level? Is because that's the same name we are using to send it down to the component. And lastly, we have the one for the score. So here too, we can have props then dot score like this. Save and go back to the page. You see that now our component is now being reused. Can you see? Single component, but I was able to use it 3 times. I don't need to start creating the same thing again and again. If there is any changes to my code, I will only do the changes once, and you see that it will affect the 3 of them because they are using the same thing. They have the same copy. So in front of username, I don't want to put username, it's now user. So if I save the code and go back to the page, you see that all of them will have that text change automatically. Not like the way you deal with your normal HTML that if you do copy and paste and if something change, you have to go to the 3 lines or 4 line, 5 line, depending on number of copy and paste that you do. You have to go there to make the changes one by one. But here, you only have one component. But that component, you are reusing it again and again. But when you are reusing a component and the data that each one of them are using is different, so you need to use prop to send down the information that the component is going to use to display the data on the screen to the user there like that. And you can do a lot of things with what we just did right now. What we just did right now is a building block of React application. You have component, you have JSX element and expression, and at the same time you have the props. These 3 combined together, you already know half of React. You already know half of React for building simple application. The only thing we just need to add to the stuff is just the state and the event along with this conditional rendering there like that. Combining everything together, you have the power to build a simple application apart from the styling. The styling is still the same thing that you'll be doing, but I just need to talk about different ways of applying style there like that. But having this basic knowledge here, you can build a simple app that doesn't deal with interaction. Because when you need interaction, that's where the state and event can start coming in. But if you don't need interaction, you already have your details, you just want to showcase on the screen, just like the way we have right now. We don't need to have event or any other thing. This thing is going to display to the user there automatically. So we don't need to do any other work like that. And that's how this thing works. But right now, our component, we want to be able to do some changes to the data. So in our component, or we want to have a component. And what is the component going to do? We want to have a component that we can click on a button, and once the button is clicked on, we want to change a particular value that is inside that button. So I want to have another component right now. So apart from this, let me comment this one out. We don't need it again. We've used it for what we want to use it for. So here we can comment out this one, and I want to create another component. So this is going to be const I'm going to call it toggler like this. So this, no, don't let me use const, let me use function because it will be used above. So this is going to be toggler, and what is it going to do? It's going to return a button. What is going to be inside the button is just the score. So let me create the score at the top here. So const score here is going to be 5, and inside this button we want to show current is going to be whatever we have in the score. Don't forget, any JavaScript code that you want to use in your JSX element, you need to put it in a curly brace so that you can treat it as normal JavaScript. So after this line now, what did I want to use? I want to use this my toggler, and like this. So save it, go back to the screen, and now we should have the button on the page. Okay, save, go back to the page. Now we have the button, but this button is not being displayed correctly. So let me apply some CSS. I think I've removed the stuff. So the button, when it is over, it will be this blue color. So when it's not over, then let me say color should just be white because it is black. The background is black, so let me just use white color inside. But when you go there, it shows that blue line. I don't really need it. So this one I don't need it. This one I don't need it at all. These are the only thing that I need. But what do we want to do here? We want to be able to click on this button and increase the value that is inside it. So this is the combination of state and event here. What is event? You want to click, you want something to happen when you click on the button. And again too, the value that is inside it, you want to update that value. So which means you have a state, and state allows you to kind of have a dynamic data in your component that can change over time. So when you are talking about state, this is used to store and manage dynamic data in your component that can change over time. So when you say manage, it's something that you can update, because you can update it, or you remove the stuff, or add or create the stuff, and so forth like that. That's where state comes in React. So this value, we want to be able to update it based on the number of times you click on the button. If you click on this in 1, it will increase the value by 1. If you click it again, it will increase it by 1, and so forth like that. But right now, this thing will not do anything for us if you click it from now till tomorrow. So what do we want to do? The first thing we want to do is for us to be able to add event listener on this button. And what is the event listener? You want to talk to this button that, okay, button, I have a specific stuff that I want to carry out anytime someone click on you. So you are talking to it that keep listening for click. So when somebody click on you, you want to carry out action. So that thing you want to use to talk to this button to listen for something, that's what we call event listener. And if you notice in our JavaScript, when you want to add event listener, you firstly create the element. If it is not on the page, you add it to the page. But if it's already on the page, you are going to select it. And once you're done selecting it, you can use your add event listener or whatever the name of the event, and so forth like that. But in React, we don't need to do all those work. We already have the element here. So on this our element, to add any event, you are going to start with on, then followed by the name of the event that one you want to listen for. But in normal HTML, when you are dealing with normal HTML, all your events, they are always in small letters. So for example now on click, so all your events in normal HTML, they are in small letter. But now in React, because now in React it's just normal JavaScript, but with extension for you to be able to use your normal HTML inside it. So when you want to deal with this thing, we don't type everything in small letter. You can see you have to capitalize every other next word that follows it. So on will be normal small letter, but every other word that follow that on, it's going to have this thing being capitalized as the start of the text there. This is what we call camel case here. So we have different naming pattern in programming. So we have something called camel case. So when you're talking about camel case, this is the naming. The starting point is small letter, but every starting point of other word are going to be in uppercase. For example, you have my name. As you can see, this is camel case. You have a user name like this. You have total balance. So everything like this is what we call camel case, and that's the same thing that this thing follow. Starting with on, then every other word that denote the event that you want to listen for, it has to start with uppercase for the starting word. Again too, we have another one known as Pascal case. So this is how this one works. So Pascal case, which is what we are using for our class name. As you can see the user info, see that every word always starts with capital letter. This is what we call Pascal case, and this is what we call camel case. So every of the Pascal case follow this pattern where you have my name, you have user name, you have total balance. So when you are creating a variable, or when you are dealing with the event on your element, or any property or any props that you are creating on your this in there, it will always follow a camel case. But when you are creating the class name, or when you are creating your component name, it will always follow Pascal case. So when you are creating your component, it follow Pascal case. When you are doing every other thing, it follow camel case. So anytime I mention camel case, you know what is going on there. So here now, what do we need to do? We need to pass the function that we want to run anytime these events occur, because you don't just want to do this instantly. You want that thing to get called later on anytime these events occur. So here, what I'm going to do is going to be increase number. So this is the name of the function that I want to create. But what is the function going to be created? So where is this function coming from? As you can see, it's complaining right now that it can't find this function. So inside your component, that's where you are going to create everything that is related to that component. That's where this definition is coming from. In React, a component is a reusable and self-contained block of code. So the block of code is going to be all the functionality that this component needs. Everything is going to be there. So like the variable, the function that you want to call later on when something happens, and a lot of other things like the state and so forth like that, everything will be defined inside your components are there. So yeah, we want to create this function. So how do we create the function? We can just use our arrow function. So increase number like this. And this arrow function is what we want to call anytime the user click on this button. But later on, what we want to do is to increase the value from 5 to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and so forth like that, depending on the number of times you click on the stuff. So this thing is going to start with 0, and from there to keep increasing based on the number of times you click on it, like that. So for example, here it's going to be, let me change it to number of click like this. So we want to know the number of click, so I will change the variable to number of click. You see the way I'm naming all this thing, like that. So it follow camel case. But when you are dealing with the name of your component, it follow Pascal. Every other thing follow camel case. Or you can use snake case. There's another one too, but this one used to come in Python a lot. So that's where you're going to be seeing this snake case. So this is what called snake case. See the pattern it follow. Anything like snake case, you're going to have my name. So you're going to have user name, total balance. But I don't use this. You can use this pattern too. But majorly, you only see this pattern in Python. But in JavaScript, these are the two major cases that we normally use. But you can see this one too. But I always follow this one a lot, like that. But you can use any one of them. But by convention, Pascal should always be used when you are dealing with name of class or when you are dealing with your component. And the camel case can be used for every other thing, or the snake case too can be used for every other thing. It will work. But Python is where you'll be seeing this one a lot. All right, so yeah, now what I want to do, for example, here, let me just console log right now, because it's going to be my button click like this. So this is how you can add any event to your React elements. So anytime you have a component and one of the elements needs to do something when an event occurs, so you can add that event to your element like this. So we have the button, but anytime the user click on the button or anybody click on the button, we want to do something. And again, to please look at the way I'm passing the stuff. I'm not calling the function myself. If you do it like this is wrong. This is not the way to do it. If you want to do it like this, then it means you must supply arrow function like this to do it. So you can do it in this way. So I'm going to comment out this one. So you can do it in this way. When you do it in this way, it's only the name you are going to pass. But there is some time you need to supply information to this your function. If you need to do that, you must create arrow function here, and that arrow function will now be the one that is going to call that your function. So you have to call it like this in it. But if you are not creating arrow function, if you are not using this method, you have to pass the name of the function directly. And when this event occurs, React is going to call this your function, which is part of your component. As you can see, it's part of the component. So going back to the page, clear everything. As you can see, there is no message. The only time the message will come outside is when this event occurs. And the only time this event can occur is when you click on the button. As you can see, my button clicked. So when you click it again, as you can see, it's called this stuff. We're showing it as 2 because the browser is saying that it's the same text. So it will just keep increasing the number of times you click on the stuff. So click again and click again. So I've clicked on this button 8 times. But it's showing in the console, this is not how we want it. We want this number too, the 0 that we have here, to change based on the number of times that the user has clicked on the button. But how do we do something like this? How do we do something like this? So we need a state, because we need to keep tracking of the value that is there before, and we need to update the value. But the problem right now, doing it in this way, this one is not going to work. So you might be thinking, what we can just do here is, okay, Don't let us use let again because you cannot change let. You cannot use const. You cannot change const. So we need to use let. And this number of click now, what we can just do is to get what is there before, then we add 1 to it by using this method or by just using the short method that we have there. But I'm going to use this simple method that is clear. So what are we doing? Whatever that is inside this number of click before, we take the value and we add 1 to it and we are putting it back. But this one will never work because of the way React work behind the scenes. So let me console log out the stuff. So the console, it will work to you, but on the page, nothing is changing. And I'm going to tell you why. The reason why it's not changing, then from there, we're going to bring the states that we need there like that. So now, let's save it and go back to the screen. So before the stuff is clicked, let me say move it off. So I would say this one is before click. Let me just say before click so that we see the value that is there. And again to after click. So after click like this. So let me just save it. So save the stuff like this and let this thing send it to the browser. And once it's sent to the browser, so it's done. Let me go back to the page, clear the console, reload the page so that we can have everything as fresh. So now let me click on the button, click. Can you see? It said before click is 0. But after click, the value has already changed. But on the screen, it's still showing 0. Why? This is what is going on there in React. So you can't just create any variable inside this your component like this. What will happen is that anytime you build a component or anytime you create a component and you render that component, what React will do is that, where's my pen? So let me bring out my pen. So what we have to do is it will come into this your component. It will keep going through it line by line. So the first time that we load the page, it's in this component that we want to show it on the screen. So React will come inside. Oh, you want to declare this variable and you want to set the value to 0. Then it will do that. Okay, this is a function. Okay, I know about that function. It will be used later on or inside this component. Anyway, I don't care whether it's being used or not, but I shall know about the function. So inside this place, we are returning button. Okay, this is what you want to display on the screen. Then React will send down this and create the necessary element on the screen. So when this thing is now clicked, because React knows that something has a click there, so what is it going to do? What it's going to do is that it's going to call this our function. So what is going on with the function? Oh, what is going on with the function is that now, what do we want to do? Okay, this thing has changed. So what it will do, okay, before click, the value, okay, it is 0 before it's click. Then from there, we console log out the button click, which we don't really need right now. And we now update the value. Yeah, the value has changed to 1. That's the reason why you are seeing that it said after click, it's 1. So when the thing see that, okay, the value has changed, we see that, oh, there is this variable that we have inside this component. And that variable has changed. So in order for React to show the new value, what React will do is that it will recall this your component again. And that recalling of this your component is what we call re-render there. So and right now I will not be saying recalling component. What I always call it re-render. So what the thing will do is going to re-render the stuff. What re-render means is that your component has already been rendered first, but something changed inside it. And since something changed, React needs to call that your component again. It needs to do everything again inside of your component so that you can get the updated value. But when the thing see that the value has changed here, it will want to call this our component again. When they call it again, can you see? It's saying that we are setting the number back to 0. And that's why you see that the thing is down back to 0. Like it's not changing at all. So React, when something changes in your component, it will have to re-render this component so that you can get the updated value. So that your UI can now show the updated value. But when this thing is clicked, you can see that when it come back into this component, it will see that we are creating this thing again and again. And since we are creating it, it will always go back to 0. So this thing will never work. In your code, when you click on this stuff, as you can see that it's changing? Can you see that it's changing? But React is not seeing this thing. Because by the time this thing will render, it will reset the value back to whatever that is there before. But in our normal JavaScript code, it's seeing that the value has changed. This is not what we want. We want the React to be able to hold the value that we are updating there. So whatever state or whatever variable that we are updating its value, even though this thing is this thing is going to re-render, we want React to maintain the value that is inside that variable. and that's where the state comes in. So with the help of state, even if your component re-rendered, it's going to know the value that you save inside that your component, and by the time the thing re-render now, you are going to see the updatable value on the screen. Not that the stuff will be doing what we don't want, because the stuff is working, but on the UI we are not seeing the value. We are seeing the console log to be correct, but on the UI it's still showing 0, because when the component get called again by the React, this stuff has already changed, so it's seeing something else, and since it's seeing something else there, then it will not work the way we are expecting it to work. So in order for this thing to work the way it's supposed to be, what we need to do, one way you might be thinking is to move this thing outside, but this is wrong too. You can't be moving data that is related to your component outside. You can do it like this, but you should always do something like this when you know that that thing will not change, and you don't want your component to re-render anytime it's changed. So that's when you do something like this, and this thing is weird that you'll be doing something like this. It's weird. They are going to do it in this way. Let me reload everything, then click on it. As you can see that it's still changing, but on the UI it's not, because React did not know that the value has changed, so it will not re-render your component because it did not see the stuff that it has updated the value there. So in order for React to trigger re-rendering from your component, like when the value change, we want the React to call this our component, and we still want it to maintain the new value that we have inside it, we need to create a state. And to create a state in React, so to create a state in React, this is how we do it. You are going to have two variables, which is going to be getting from this function, which is what we call use state. This is hooks, but later on when we get to the advanced part, that's why I'll be talking more about hooks. But for now, anytime you want to create a state, you are going to call this function, and this function here, it's coming from React. So and this function here is not just any normal function, just like the way your component here is not normal function, it is called component. So anything that starts with use, they are referred to as hooks. So which is something we are going to be, as you can see, I have it there under the React intermediate. We are going to be talking more about hooks when we get to the intermediate part. But for now, just know that when you want to create a state, you need to call this use state. Then this use state is returning two things for us. It's going to return whatever state that you want it to hold for you, and what you are going to use to update that state, because it's not simple like that. React needs to know that your state has changed, and in order for React to know that the state has changed, so we need to call a function, and that function is what is going to trigger the calling of your component again. You are going to see that this thing is the same pattern you're always going to follow every time. So now, instead of having our variable like this, so we delete this one, or let me comment it out instead of deleting it, then we pass it here. Then the second thing we are going to pass here is the function that is going to be updating our, because you cannot, can you see here, you cannot be updating it like this again. You have to call a function that is going to update the state, and this is the pattern that this thing follow. You are going to have the name of the variable and the function that is going to update it, and by convention we normally start the name of the function by set. So by convention, all name used to start with set. You can call it anything you want, but by convention, when you are dealing with state, you are going to have the name here, then followed by state, and followed by that same name you are using. I'm going to create multiple of them. I'm going to create multiple so that you can see them in action. So this is how to create a state like this. So whatever name you are using as your variable, you are going to have set that variable. For example, now if I want to set username, so I can just say user, then the function that will update it will now be set user. Can you see the pattern? Whatever name you are using here, you are going to do set here, then you use your camel case like that. So it's going to be use state. So I'm creating a state to hold our user, and this state is something that can change, and that's where this function comes in. So the function is what you are going to use to update later on anytime it changes. If it's not changing, then you are not going to be using this one. But anytime you have state, it means it's something that can change over time, and it's dynamic, because dynamic it's going to change. The value are going to be different. So, and it can change over time. So this is the pattern. So if I want to create for password now, it's going to be const like this. So password, then the other one is now going to be set password. This one you can use any name you want, but by convention, this is the pattern we normally follow. So that when you have a lot of sets later on, you know which one is being set and the one that is not being set. So when you see set user, you already know that it's updating this state. When you see set password, you know that it's updating this use state here. And when you see set number of click, you know that this is the state that is going to get updated. But if you like, you can call this one X, you can call this one Y, you can call this one Z. It will work. But the problem is that you lose readability of your code. In your code later, when you have a lot of things, you start, or somebody come with to your code and want to know what is X, it will be hard for them to quickly know what X is doing. But when you just say set user, set password, set number, whatever stuff, anybody that is in React or anybody that is building application using React, once they see set, they already know that you're updating state. So that's the reason why we have the conversion, and that's what everybody follow. And once you see anybody code, you always see that it's the same. The difference is just the text they are using. So the difference is the text they are using or the name they are using there, like that. So I'm going to comment out all this one because we are not using them like that. So here we have a state. Inside the state, we are going to be receiving the value, and this our value here. You can pass what we refer to as default value here, so which means the starting value. Because now when the thing is starting, you don't really have any value, because if you look back, our number of click is starting with 0. So how do we give this in a value of 0? That's where the default value comes in. Whatever you pass here, that's your default value. That's the value it's going to start with, but the value can change later on. And how are we going to change the value? So we can call this our set. So instead of us using this method, because you cannot just call this one to update it again, you must call the set, and set is a function, and whatever you pass inside this function, that's what is going to replace whatever value that is inside your state before. If it states that, or if whatever value that is there before, if it is 5, and you call this your function and you pass another thing to it, it will replace 5 with that new value. And that's what we are doing here. So we are updating our state with whatever that is there before. We add 1, then we now put it back inside our state like this. But this one, before click and after click, you are going to see something that is going to happen here. But on our UI now, the stuff should be working fine now, because we are using a state. So React, we know that once we call this function set, once we call the set state, React, we know that, okay, something has changed in your component. So what we to do is that it will re-render. What will render? It will call this your component again and run everything. But when it's running it, it will not recreate this your state. It will maintain the new value that you put here. So by the time you now get down here, it will be see the new value, and you see the updated value on the screen. So now if you go back here, and let me clear this one, press enter to load everything from the beginning. Now click on the button. Can you see? So can you see what happened? But if you look at this, if you now look at the console, the value has changed, but the console is telling us that the value has not changed. This one is advanced stuff that I'm going to be talking about later on, like that. So that's advanced stuff. I don't need to be explaining all those one right now, because when you are accessing the value or you update any of the value, it will not give you the updated value instantly after that line. But for now, forget about that one. We are going to get into it when we are dealing with advanced stuff in React. But for the simple stuff, we don't need all this one. But it's something that is going to come in later on when we are dealing with advanced stuff. Now we have a state, and as you can see, as you are clicking on the stuff, it's updating the state, because it will get the value that is there before, add 1 to it, then now update the state. When you want to update your state, you always use the set state that you created. So when you want to create a state, you are going to call this use state, which is a hook that is given to us by React. You are going to see how to work with other hooks that we have in React on some external one, and the one you'll be creating yourself. But for now, this is how to work with this use state. You are going to create the variable, which is going to be in a square bracket like this, because this use state is not returning one item back to you. It's returning 2 things to you. The first thing is the actual data that you put there, and again too, the second thing is returning is what you are going to use to update it later on. So you can name it anything you want. I'm the one that call this one number of click, set number of click. That's the pattern. So whatever you use as a variable to hold the state, you are going to use set that name of the variable, because later on in your application, you are going to have a lot of sets or a lot of states. So you want to quickly distinguish between one state from the other one. So naming them correctly will always help you later on. You can quickly call this anyhow you want, but when you are working with a serious application, it will give you a lot of headache when you need to scroll up or down to quickly know what that variable is all about. But when you use a name that is corresponding to what that state is all about, and you follow this convention, you see that when you see a code, even if you are not at the top here and you are down somewhere in the code base, you already know what is going on with that variable because the name is even talking to you already. That's why I call this one number of click. If I want, I can just call it X and set X. It will work. But what is X all about? It doesn't make sense. So you can call it anything you want, but through this name now, before you even see where it's being used, you already know what that thing is all about. Number of click. Oh, this thing is telling me that this is the counter of the number of click that the user have there. And whatever you pass inside this state for now, this is just simple way. You can pass a function to it, but this is just simple stuff about the state because we are dealing with basic. When we get to the intermediate and the advanced one, you are going to see other ways of using states and some other hooks. But for now, any state you are creating, you can pass their default value. For example, here you can just pass the name here like that. So this is the default value for the user and so forth like that. So save, go back to the screen and you see that can you see after saving it still maintain the state. The value did not change, and if you click, it knows where the thing stops. Even if you the only time it will reset back is when you reload the page. That's when, because now you've reload the entire application, so it will go back to the default. But if you make changes to your code and you just save, it will still maintain the state of your application. It will not change. It will still maintain the current state of it, and that's the power of React there like that. So we have JSX, we have component, we have props, we have JSX, we have events, we have states, and all these things now can be combined together now to build an application, simple application. For example, here we can have input, and that input now, anytime the user type in the box, we want to see the text in another place, so we can combine everything together. For example, here now I want to have typist, so I'm going to comment out this one. The experience we have from here, that's the same thing we are going to use, combining everything together. So I'm going to create another component here, so function. So I'm going to call it typing component like this. So what is this component all about? So we are going to return what we want to display, which is going to be div. Inside this div that we want to return, we are going to have the input at the top. So we are going to have input at the top like this. So we're going to have input, so it's not giving me, so let me type it myself. Input like this. So under the input, I'm going to have br for now so that I can be under it, and again I'm going to have this p. So whatever the user is typing, I want to show it inside this place. Whatever the user is typing, I want to show it inside this p. But you know that as user is typing here, we need to get the value and we put it inside the p. So we need to create a state that will hold the value that the user is typing there. So here we need to create our state. So const value. So let me just say type the value like this, set type. You can see the pattern, typed value. So whatever name you use here, you just use set whatever that same name. So it's going to be use state. So what is going to be the default stuff? Empty string, because at that time, the first time the application will load, you don't have anything typed yet. So inside our input, we are going to have our placeholder. So placeholder, enter. So enter your text like this. By default, the input is going to be of type text. So save it and let us go to the screen first, or let me even put this one. So inside this box, I'm going to put this stuff like this. So what's going on VS Code? So whatever you type, we're going to see it inside this stuff. So now let's use our component, because the component has not been used yet, so that's why it's complaining like that. So let me just call it like this, because I'm not sending anything down to it. So save the component, save the file, and go back to the screen, and we should have, as you can see here, we have this box. But now if you type anything, as you can see, it's not coming down here, because there is no connection between this, our input, and the state that we have. The state is not changed. As you can see, this is showing error already that we are not using this set state. So what do we need to do? We need to connect this our set state into our input. So anytime something changed on this input, we want to set the value. So that's another event again. So how do you get what the user is typing? So we can use on change. So this is another event that you can listen for, and this event will get fired in React. This one is quite different from normal unchange in this, in your normal HTML. This unchange will fired on your input anytime you type something. That means anytime there is on input or unchange. But just know that anytime you want to get the updated value that the user typed from the box, this is what you are going to use. So we need to pass a function. So we need to call this our handle value change like this. So this is a function that we need to call. And where do we define the function? See that it's the same pattern that we are following. So we have this function that we're going to be creating up here, and the function will get called anytime the event fired. And where is the event going to fire? It's going to get fired when you type inside that box. That's where this on change, not on click. No, when you click, that's where the on click will fire. Or on change, when you are typing in the box, it will keep firing every time you type something inside the box. And I can just quickly console log by just saying console log change like this. So change like this. So save, and let us go back to the screen and look at the console. You see that every time we type inside the input, it will always call this function, and it will always console log out the change. But that's not what we want to do. We want to get the value that user actually typed. So we're going to see how to do that by talking to the event that is getting. Can you see? So once you type, it will always get called. So it means I've already typed like 11 or 12 times like that. So let me reload the page again like this. So I typed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. As you can see, it's corresponding to the number of stuff that I've typed. So as you are typing, it will keep firing this function. But that's not what we want to do. We want to actually get what the user typed. And how do you get what the user typed? You know, in normal JavaScript, when you listen for an event, it's going to send down the event that occurred to you. So React 2 is going to do this thing for you. Whatever function you pass into this onClick, that function will get called with the event that occurred. So we can actually receive it here. So here now the event, we can actually receive it, which is something you can call anything you want. But I'm calling the event here to just remind you that that's what we're going to call, that's what we have there. But most of the time, you only see that people using E, which is the same thing as an event, short for event. It's just a parameter. You can name it anything you want. So save this in, and let us go back to the screen there. So now we're always going to see the events that occur every time we type something. So if I type 5, as you can see, it's coming with this synthetic base event. So React has customized the event that you have there. So it's not normal event that you are used to. So to get the actual event that occur, it is under this native event. Can you see? It fired the input event. Even though it's unchanged that we put there, but it's firing this input event. So behind the scene, React, or that unchanged, React is doing a lot of stuff with it. If you are doing it with your normal HTML, there are 2 events you need to add in order for that thing to work, like the way React is doing right now. But React has already taken care of that stuff for you behind the scene. Your own is just to use onChain. It will always fired anytime you type something. When you use onChain normally with your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, it will only fired when you leave the stuff. After you done typing and you now leave, that's when it will fire. But with React, it will always fire every time you type something, because behind the scene, it fired this input event, not just the normal change that is coming from normal HTML. And as you can see again too, we have access to the target, which is the same thing you can do with your normal HTML. And the target is the element that, fire the event. And you know that on this input, we can now have access to its value. So here now, instead of us just console log out the event here, what we can just do is to set type value like this. So set type value, which is going to be whatever the user type inside the box. How do we get what the user type inside the box? We have the event. On the event, we have a target. And on the target, which is going to be the input. So as you can see, target is the input. And as you can see that on the input, can you see that there is a value? So this value is what we want to have access to, that React is giving us. You see it in normal HTML too, but React bring it up and it added some other information that we don't need right now. The only thing we need is a value. So on the event, we have the target, the element that triggered the element that we attach the event on. Then we can now have access to the value because we are dealing with input. This target is the input. So we know that on the input, we have access to value. This thing is depending on the element you attach event to. So for input, you always have value. For some other element like H1, and there is nothing like value. So you can't use value to get the value inside it. So it will not work. You have to go down and use inner HTML, which this one too, like that. If you scroll down to the stuff, you can see this is input, inner text, inner HTML, nothing is inside them. But when you're dealing with any other element that you're not typing inside, this is what you are going to use to have access to their content, like the button and so forth like that. So you'll be using inner HTML also. But this is input. To get a value, you are going to use the value directly like this. So what is this saying? Yeah, the G is missing. So like this, yes. So everything is okay now. Now save the code, go back to the screen. Now everything we type, it will always show. So if I type D, we should see the stuff is still not loading. Let me reload the stuff because we're supposed to see the value and I'm not seeing anything on the page. So what is going on? So I have this text value and I have this updated value there like that. Let me check. Hope this thing is something is not wrong with it. So let me check the page. Everything's supposed to be here. So let me see what is inside the stuff. Input the P. I'm not seeing anything coming now inside it. So let me put this thing in front of it. So typed value like this should be this. So we have this our typing, so save in front of it, and we should see the text is still loading because this thing is not showing the text yet. What's going on? Oh yeah, update. Why this thing is slowing down? Save now. Yeah, so types value, we have this text. So now everything that I type this inside, can you see now? The stuff is now showing. The reason it's not showing before is because that thing is not having height. There is no content there before, so the stuff did not have height, so it will not show. Or the thing did not have the width, so nothing was showing inside the P there like that. And as you can see, whatever I type inside the box, so if I clean it, as you can see, the text is going to be empty. So it will have empty text. If I type Wari Solar here like that, as you can see, it's updating the stuff based on the experience that we have. So we have component. Inside our component, we have a value or we have a variable, but that variable can change over time, and that variable is what we call state. To create a state, you are going to import this use state from the React there, and you are going to set it up in this way by giving it a name, and the second is only going to be set like this in this format. And whatever name you use for the name of the variable, you only do that set name after it. This is the convention. Then we talked about the events, which is a way of handling action that can go on the page. But before I call it a day, I want to quickly talk about this conditional rendering here. And what is conditional rendering? Look at this, our input. Let me go to the page like this. So let me go back to the page. You see that the first time that we did not type, or when we don't have anything inside the box, you see that this stuff is empty. So instead of us showing this stuff, we can actually display another message in front of it. So if there is nothing inside this box, we want to talk to the user, type something. But if there is something inside this box, we want to show what the user type, and that's what we call conditional rendering. You want to show something on the screen based on the condition. For our own now, the condition is that when there is something inside the state, we show that stuff. But when there is nothing inside the state, we want to show a text to them that you've not typed anything inside the box. And that's where the power of this conditional rendering comes in React. So how do you do conditional rendering? It's simple. It's just as if you are using if-else statement to render something. But the simple case inside this place is to use our ternary operator that you know in JavaScript. And that's why JavaScript is necessary. Because in React, even though it's helping you to do some stuff, you are still going to be using JavaScript. So what is ternary operator? This is it here. Where you have yes, we've talked about this, and even I taught you guys that in 200 level that time where we are dealing with C like that. So you have no. So you have the condition here. So you are going to ask the question, So you have question. So if the question is yes, this is what you want to do. But if the question is no, this is what you want to do, like that. For example, I have is 5 greater than 10? No, question mark, like this. So what I want to do is go home. So if the 5 is greater than 10, this is what we want to show. But if 5 is not greater than 10, then we want to say stay. And now if I do it, can you see what is showing is stay? Because it will ask this question: is this in yes or no? If it is yes, do this. But if it's not yes, do the other one. And that's what we can use to in React. So if user has typed something inside this place, show what the user typed. But if the user has not typed anything, show another text. So we can use that one too inside this place. So how do we do it? We can just add a question. Is this thing there? If it is there, show it. But if it is not there like that, we just want to show another text, which is going to be please enter some text in the box. So look at this now. This is what we call conditional rendering. So we want to display two things, but one at a time. We have two things that is going to go to the screen, but only one of them is going to show at the time based on the condition. And what is the condition here? The condition is that we are checking whether this thing have value or not, because as you can see, it is empty. Anything that is empty is false in JavaScript. I've talked about this thing in Boolean. If you convert it to Boolean, any empty stuff like this, as you can see, is just false. And when it is false, it means it will do the second one. When it's not false, then it's going to do the first one. Even if you put space there, it will still do the first one. But I don't want it to bring space. So what I can do here is just to trim it, because I know that it is string that is going to be there. So what I can just do is to trim the stuff first. Any space that is there first, remove it. But before I trim it, let's see the problem that that thing is going to cause first before we provide solution. So now let's save it. So what this thing is going to do is that it will check, does this thing translate to false or true? So if it translates to true, it's going to do what you have here and abandon everything here. But if it translates to false, it will abandon what you have here and it will do the second option. And what we are doing here is what we call conditional rendering, because we are not going to see these two, only one is going to come outside on the screen. That's what we call conditional rendering. And once this thing is saved successfully, then it's going to show, but this thing is not saved. Wow, what's wrong with this thing? So once this thing is show, what is saved, can you see what is showing? Please enter some text in the box. But once I start typing, can you see what it's now doing? It's remove what is there before, it's now replace it with the content. And again too, if I remove everything back, as you can see, it will go back to the other text. This is what we call conditional rendering. You are displaying component, text, or anything you want to show on the screen based on a particular condition. And this is the simplest way of doing it. You are going to see other way of handling conditional rendering, but this is the simplest way of handling conditional rendering in React. There like that. And this is what I said is going to happen. So imagine an Apple space. Can you see what is happening? It's accepting space, but nothing is showing on the screen because it's showing something, but what is showing is just this empty space. And that's the reason why I want to use trim here. So what is trim? Trim is going to remove any space that you have beside your text. So that's what trim is going to do. When you have a string like this, so if I have empty string and you just use trim like this, as you can see, it's going to remove all those space. If you just do it like this without trim like that, can you see, it will return the same thing back. And that's what is happening here. So we don't want to have all those extra space around the stuff. So what we can do is just to trim it. But I'm using this knowledge attachment here to check whether the thing is okay or not. If it's okay, use trim. If it's not okay, don't even go to the trim. That's what that is doing. The question mark here is different from the question mark here. They are not the same. So you are going to see some other one too. There is one that is using two. I will bring that one too later on where we need it. So there is a different ways of handling conditional rendering, but this is the simplest way of dealing with conditional rendering. Now, if you go back to the screen, which can you see, even though you have empty stuff there, it will still tell you that you've not typed. But if you type a character, as you can see, it's only arrow that is showing. Every other space that is there, that's already, it's showing it too. But if you want to remove that text too, you can actually trim it from here too. Or instead of us doing it like this, we can create a variable which is known as derived state. But all these derived states right now, I will not be talking about that, but we can have them later on. Let me just call it derived typed value like this. You are going to see this one later on. So instead of me using .trim every time, I can just place it here. So what this one will do is that whatever the value that is here, it will always trim it and put the updated value here. So that's what it just did. So this one, the reason why it's called derive is because it's based on what is here. So it's getting the value, trim it, and that's what it's going to use down here. So instead of me doing trim every time, I only did it one time at the top here, and I'm now using that. It's still going to get updated because anytime this thing change, we have to re-render this stuff, and once we have to render this stuff, it will update this value because it will only recreate this one every time, and it's based on what is coming from here, and that's why it is derived. But this one has changed. Since this one has changed, it will take the updated value, and on the screen you only see it, but it is using the other trim one that is there like that. So whether there is trim, whether there is a space or no space, as you can see, it's still the same R, even if it is after, or you know, as you can see like that, it's only this thing that we have only one space, because HTML will only show one space like that if it is in between text. But if it's after text, it will trim it out. JavaScript will remove all those space after. But if it is in between, it will not remove. But on the HTML part, HTML will only show a single space. Even though there are multiple spaces here, it will only return single space for the HTML. So these are just normal HTML stuff. And that's where we're going to be stopping today. So in the next class now, we are going to be talking about the list rendering. So what is list rendering? This is where you have a bunch of items that you want to render again and again and again, just like the way we did this user info here. So instead of us calling it like this by ourselves, we can loop through the data and we keep generating the component automatically based on the number of data that is being sent to us. You can imagine that you have a list of 200 items. Are you not going to be calling the component yourself one by one? No. You have the array of the data, then you are going to loop through the stuff and you render it. And that's what we call list rendering in React. So in React, you can render a list with some type of loop. So, and we're going to see how to do all this thing. After that, we're going to talk about different way of styling our item, because if you look at it now, this thing look ugly. It's not looking nice. So we should be able to style our page. And after that, we should, if there is time, we should have time. So we're going to work on a basic React application. Then in the following class, we are going to be talking about other things like that. So that is going to be all for today. Thank you. Let me stop recording.